And first tonight, capturing the controversial debut of Lord Wolfenden's inquiry into gay rights, BBC4 raided the archive. Sir John meets the press.
The Wolfenden Committee's report on the law relating to homosexual offences and prostitution was published in 1957 and led to the eventual decriminalisation of homosexuality.
Press conference. Tonight's guest is the chairman of the Committee on Homosexual Offences and Prostitution, Sir John Wolfenden. Questioning him in the studio are Walter James of the Times Educational Supplement, Charles Curran of the Evening News, and John Freeman of the New Statesman and Nation.
Sir John, what I think everybody knows about this controversial report that you've just put your name to is that it deals with the two main subjects of prostitution and homosexual acts. Now, we're going to question you about both of them, but first about prostitution. Now, it seems to me the criticism which has been brought from a good many quarters against your recommendations is this, that you've been content just to make recommendations which tuck away out of sight a scandal, sweep under the carpet is a phrase which some people have used. In fact, that you've been humbugs about it. Now, is that a fair criticism, do you think, or not?
I wouldn't have said so myself, no. I think it would have been a fair criticism if we had been setting out, by the recommendations that we made, to try to abolish prostitution. Because if you are setting out deliberately intending to abolish it from the point of view of public morality, then clearly just to drive it under the carpet, as you say, would be humbug. But what we were really trying to do was not that. We thought that our concern was with crime, with offences against the law, rather than with, if I may use the word, sin.
Yes, but if I can cut in there, you are slightly begging a question, because it's your recommendations which determine what is crime. Now, are you drawing a sharp distinction between crime and sin, and if so, what is the distinction?
Well, then may I try it another way around? Yeah. What I would have thought that we were concerned with in this whole field, so far as our job went, was this, that we were really concerned with public order and decency, and with the protection and safeguarding of those who need to be protected and safeguarded. We were not concerned with the private, personal, moral responsibility of an individual adult man or woman for his or her private sexual behaviour. Is that a fair distinction?
Yes, I think it is.
No, it's a fair distinction, but I don't think it goes far enough, you know. After all, the criminal law of this country does, and I think must, more or less represent public opinion. The criminal law, in fact, isn't enforceable unless public opinion is broadly with it. Now, won't you agree, perhaps you won't agree, but I'd like to know whether you do agree, that so far the law relating to both these matters with which your report has dealt has broadly reflected public opinion. Now, what grounds have you got for supposing that public opinion has been changed? Well, have you got any evidence to justify the belief that public opinion has been modified?
Just a second. I would, if I may, disagree with what you said just then about public opinion being, if you like, represented by the law as it at present stands, certainly about prostitution, because I thought that really one of the big things that we've had thrown at us over the last 3 years was, here is public opinion desperately anxious to clean up the streets. Yes. So the public opinion is not satisfied with the present law. I think that's pretty clear.
Yes.
The public opinion is also concerned, surely, with general morality. And I don't think it's fair to draw a distinction between the law and moral feeling in the community at large. I think there is a connection between them.
Surely.
They don't cover each other exactly, but I think there is a connection there.
Yeah, I quite agree. I mean, I wouldn't for a moment say that the law is entirely one thing, and public opinion or public morality and opinions about morality are all different. I mean, there's a thin line, if you like, between them. But if I may just say so, I think that what you've got to remember is that you can't, in fact, legislate for private, personal, moral responsibility. If you do, you see, you're doing the opposite of what you intend to do. May I just go on for 1 second? When I was a schoolmaster years ago, I thought that it was a good thing that the rules of a school should represent as completely and as nearly as possible the way in which I wanted boys to behave. And I would have been prepared to generalize that to the laws of a state. Now, it may well be that for boys and girls at school, that's a good idea. But I think it's not a good idea for the laws of a state. I absolutely agree with you, Curran, that the law and public opinion have got to be very close to each other. But if you cover the whole field of a man's life by the law, you are in effect depriving him of personal responsibility.
I must just ask Sir John now if he will turn from the cities of light and darkness to the cities of the plain, because there's another subject
yes,
we've
right.
got to talk about.
Yep.
Look, the recommendation you've made about the laws of homosexuality, there's a key question, I think, here, and it's this. Do you think that by reducing the danger of adult males committing homosexual acts, you're in fact encouraging the spread of homosexuality? Because from society's point of view, that seems to me to be a crucial question.
Well, may I get it quite clear? Do you mean the spread of the condition or state of homosexuality?
No, I do not.
The spread, the increase in homosexual
in the
behavior?
perpetration of acts, yes.
Yes, and do you mean homosexual acts between adults?
Yes.
Or homosexual acts between adults and minors?
Well, primarily between adults, but of course if you encourage a spread of acts in general, then you are liable to spread it among minors as well as among adults.
Well, that, if I may take that point
Yeah.
first, that is apparently a very controversial and difficult question. It seems from practically all the evidence we've had, I wouldn't say unanimously, but an overwhelming majority of the evidence is that there are two kinds of men, two broad categories of men of this kind: those who prefer contemporaries as their partners, and those who prefer boys or young men. And that very seldom do the two overlap. That is the medical evidence.
So it's really your serious belief that if you do take the risk of spreading homosexual acts among adults, you will not in fact be imperiling children any more than they are
It
at present.
could very well be that it was a safeguard.
Yes,
It could very well be that it was a safeguard because, you see, at the present moment, there are, I'm afraid, a certain number of men who do commit homosexual acts with boys or younger men. And they, of course, will still be liable to the law. There's no doubt about that. If the homosexual acts between adult consenting males in private were no longer criminal, there would be no temptation to the man of that sort to go to boys as there might now.
But there would, of course, as your dissenting member
Yes,
of the committee
indeed.
pointed out, be an increase of a favourable atmosphere, or there might be, yes.
That is so. Favourable in this sense, again, that I don't think, if I may come back to this point where we started almost, I don't think that any of us who signed this report, I think I can speak for everybody, I don't think any of us who signed this report want to be thought to be approving or condoning, in a moral sense, homosexual behaviour.
But you are, in a sense, more tolerant of it.
Well, anyway,
What we're saying is
giving it a
that
certificate of immunity.
No,
aren't
no,
you?
what we're saying, may I say this, we're not, I think, to be taken, I don't want to be taken very seriously, as approving or encouraging or morally approving of this sort of behaviour. The churches don't. They say it's sin, you see. What we're saying is that we don't approve of it morally, just as we don't approve of all sorts of other things morally, for instance, adultery and fornication. But we don't see why this particular form of sexual misbehaviour, as distinct from adultery, fornication, lesbianism, all the others, we don't see why this particular form of sexual behaviour, which we regard, as most of us, as morally repugnant, why that and that only should be a criminal offence.